recording. Going.
Mark, you're cutting in and out. Sorry to interrupt you. You're really cutting in and out.
Better? Seth, can you hear me? Breaking in and out. Muted, Seth.
It's really soft now. I can't hear you.
I can hear you, but just barely. Seth was much louder.
Spencer, if you're taking just a second to introduce yourself, that would be awesome. And I will log out and log back in. Thanks, and talk to you in a second. Is that any better?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Awesome. So I believe we're still recording. Yep, we're still recording. So Spencer, that was kind of quick in and out. Did you get a chance to do introductions, or do we need to jump in and do a quick introduction for you, Spencer?
Hi everyone. My name is Spencer Vaught, and I am the newest member on the Create team with Mark and Seth and Sonia.
Spencer's bringing a great wealth of education background. He's being a little bit modest right now, but he's got a doctorate in education and some great experience that he's going to bring to the team. And I'm excited about the new opportunities we're going to have in doing some amazing things here in Create. So welcome, Spencer. And Spencer, this is everyone.
Hi, everyone.
All right. So hopefully everybody likes the 10 minutes. I've heard good feedback on that. But I'll just put the banner up from now on, and hopefully everybody comes on at the time they're supposed to and doesn't just use the 10 minutes as extra time to do something else now. But hopefully you're taking that 10 minutes to review the material. And last time we did this, we had some great conversation around our topic. So hopefully that extra 10 minutes just to kind of catch up on the world. I know it's a busy time and tough for everybody to get done everything they need to do. So we're going to keep trying this and see if it works to give people a little extra time just to be a little more prepared to discuss. So with that being said, today's topic is UDL, or Universal Design for Learning. And it really is centered around making sure your classes are accessible for everyone and acceptable as well. So with that being said, like we usually say, I'm going to get out of the way and let people talk. But did anybody bump into something new or exciting that they saw in the material that they wanted to share?
Well, this is Meg. Oh, sorry.
Go for it. Please do.
This is Meg, and this is really basic, but I was kind of intrigued with the connection between universal design and the disability movement. I watched the third link down. It was a YouTube video, and I don't know, that just kind of made sense to me because I've always kind of struggled with the idea of universal design and what all needs to be included, and just his visuals of, you know, sidewalk cutouts and people trying to push baby strollers up onto the sidewalks. Just those visuals really kind of made it a much more clear topic or concept for me, I guess.
This is Lori. I actually have a question for people, not so much a insight, but one of the things that it's so funny because I just read an article this morning about this, and then I saw it in the materials that we were given also. My issue is this idea of flexibility, which I absolutely offer students, especially with regard to deadlines. But what I always struggle with is, and what I always worry is going to get me in trouble, is this idea of being flexible yet holding students accountable. So I think there's a line to draw at some point. So I want to be flexible, and I certainly am. But then where do you draw the line in terms of holding students accountable? For instance, I still have students this semester who haven't turned in very many assignments. So I was just curious what others think.
Hey, Lori, I try and find a whatever works for me, but I make sure that that is clearly communicated to the students. For me, my tests, they're more of along a strict, it has to be taken at this time in this place. But a lot of my other work, I'm very fluid with it. I don't, and I tell them that up front. I'm okay if things get turned in a little bit late, as long as you communicate with me. If you are willing to talk to me, whether it's via email, via Teams, a text message, whatever it is, let me know, and I can make that deadline very fluid, because things come up. We all have life, and that happens in the workforce too. Things come up, things get in the way, and things have to get pushed back, and deadlines. There are some hard ones and there are some fluid ones, but I just make sure that's very clear for the students. This is the deadline, these are the fluids.
Yeah, thank you. I think I have a similar practice. I do kind of the same thing, and I communicate over and over again that the best thing they can do is keep me posted on, what's going on. But even then, like I said, I still have students who haven't turned in, who've turned in maybe half of their assignments. So at what point do you start to push, or do you just wait till, you know, two 2 days before grades are due?
If I guess another thing that I do a lot is if I haven't heard from them, or they haven't properly communicated to my standard and what I am expecting, I just put a 0 in the grade book, and that seems to make a lot of students be like, oh, there's something that's due, and it sort of clicks another level for them. And so I found that that is really helpful for those that are either not communicating or haven't really done much.
Yeah, that's great.
Any other thoughts on universal design?
I was curious, I don't know how much we know this, but what is the universal design on a campus level? Do we have a universal design for what our Brightspace courses are supposed to look like, or things of that nature?
So there is some extent. So there's all the universal access kinds of things as far as physical spaces. So there's an awful lot when it comes to room design about physical spaces even. So if you go down to basement 244 room, when we put the monitors in there, you had to be above a certain height so people weren't walking into monitors. So if you think of a visually impaired person walking through a hallway and there's a monitor above, is that above a certain height? So there's certainly physical things that are there. As far as Brightspace goes, that's a lot of what the template's about. And we continually are revising the templates to make sure that those fit the UDA guidelines. Are we doing a perfect job of it? Absolutely not. And there's always a lot of room for growth. So if you see things that we should be putting in the template, or things that we should be paying more attention to, absolutely share those with this group, with myself, with my team, to make sure we're hitting those things that are needed. But I think that the big picture of UDL is really, let's make sure they're accessible for all people and welcoming, not only accessible, but welcoming to all folks as well. So this really did start with the whole universal access and special needs area, but it's grown into, let's make it accessible for all people on all levels in many different ways. So you'll see things like different ways to present. I know, Meg, you and I were talking at that last Apple session. Wouldn't it be great if we had videos of the lecture, podcast of the lecture, and text-based of the lecture? But that can be a lot of work. So I'm looking at workflows to help provide those, so it makes it easy for faculty to generate that. There's all kinds of places where UDL fits that you really don't stop to think about.
I have one comment when you're talking about like accessibility and things like that. I'm colorblind. And so, and I know a few of the students are too, obviously, but I would be careful of like pie graphs and things like that, or make sure that we're labeling them a little differently, not depending just on color when we're doing that kind of thing. Like maybe put shapes in them too. So if you want to do like red, put like a triangle in it too, and then put that on your legend, just so, you know, if there are the colorblind students that do struggle with graphs that you're using in your classroom.
I think that's really great. In addition, maybe even for like pictures or graphics like that, having an alternate format, like having that same item described in text somewhere, like the basic concepts of it, can be really helpful for people who can't interpret the image, or maybe there's something in particular in the image you really want them to, or the graphic or the pie graph or whatever you really want them to attend to. Providing the alternate text, or verbally or in writing, pointing out those really critical things can be really helpful in terms of increasing access.
Thanks for joining us, Lisa. I appreciate that. I'd ask Lisa to join in. We've got an entire team that helps with this entire environment. So don't hesitate if you've got questions to reach out to Lisa and the crew over there, because they've got a wealth of resources to help us with. So thanks again for joining in.
Are there certain colors that are better to use if you're talking about using colors in a presentation? Are there some that are typically better to use than others?
There's different types of colorblind. We struggle with different things. Like I was speaking to a student that couldn't tell the difference between limes and lemons and things like that. So it just depends. I find it helpful when there's like a shape involved too. So if you were going to do, like I said, if you're going to do like a pie graph, you want to do blue, put a circle in there, and then put the circle on the legend too, or the key. And I'm not sure if I'm using that word right, but that's what I find helpful. But again, I'm just speaking for myself personally.
In terms of text and background, sometimes just choosing, I mean, one good practice is choosing highly contrasting colors. Like when I typically do, I mean, for me, not that I can speak for everybody, but when I do PowerPoints, typically I choose white on black, or something that really contrasts with black, so it stands out really well. Because sometimes I love it when students or faculty or whoever loves to make really super creative PowerPoints and goes all out with all kinds of colors and text and things. But sometimes making something beautiful doesn't always make it super accessible. Like when the colors are too close to each other, or there's text over the top of a picture, or like a really busy background and text on top of it, that can be really challenging. So seeking like really highly contrasting colors between the background and the text can be helpful.
Another example I've seen is some people will put like the text in red if it's like really important to call attention. So like when you're lecturing or anything like that, make sure that you make the students aware that you're calling attention to that, just in case.
In grad school, there was another student that was colorblind, and so we always had to put a rectangle or a square around what we were trying to highlight. And that was another way, especially if it was a single word or something, that was another way.
Taylor, I'm interested with your colorblind. There's a red laser pointer that you can use in both PowerPoint or Keynote. Is that something that's visible to folks with color blindness, or is that a challenge as well?
I'm not sure I've ever seen it. So I would have
Okay,
to
so
agree on that.
maybe people
Maybe I
using it,
have
you've
seen it and
never
I
seen
don't
it.
know that I have.
Okay.
A lot of colorblind people, this is a very general statement, they can't see red and distinguish it from other things, so they don't see laser pointers, but green ones they can see.
Okay.
At least that's a very big generalization. That's not really always true.
I mean, to that point, and not just about colors, but so for me, as somebody who is visually impaired, I can see colors, but I can't see like lots of things. And so that brings about all kinds of challenges. And so providing alternate ways of accessing the things that are super visual is really helpful. So like for example, when I was in undergrad and even in grad school doing like statistics and things, like when an instructor was maybe demonstrating something um, or showing a picture or whatever, in the science classes this was particularly difficult because so much is like visual. And one thing that really helped is like not just saying like, look at this picture or look at this like specimen or something, but then providing like a verbal description of what you're really wanting um, the individual to know and take away from that can be really helpful. Because I mean, I don't know, and that also can, and it's not just like, this is where the universal design really comes into play, is like good for one person might be good for everybody. So you providing a really verbally detailed description of something is maybe not just going to help somebody who maybe can't see well, or someone who's in the back of the room and can't really see what's going on in the front of the room, but for people who are really auditory learners, that additional description can be really helpful. Or for a student who's maybe recording the lecture that you're giving in class, when you provide that extra detail, like it's additive to the learning experience.
I've heard that from my students as I've gone through my lectures going to online so that we can have better discussions in class. A lot of my students, I guess not a lot, I've had comments saying you should be more descriptive when you're doing this because I turn off what you are saying or what you are looking at, where you are looking, and I just watch what's on the slideshow. I don't look at what you are doing. So if you could be more descriptive in what you're describing or what you're talking about, I've gotten that comment a lot from my recorded, or that feedback from my recorded lectures a lot. So just another point to Lisa's comment.
That's going to be very important in a workflow that I'm working on as well, because Brightspace will actually now transcribe your videos that you record. So you can get a text-based written article about the lecture that was just recorded. So the more descriptive you can be, the more that's going to play into that text-based piece. Because if you get a transcription that says, look at this, or as you can see here, and I can't see it because I'm reading the text, having that description in there is certainly going to be helpful that way as well. For many of you, if you didn't get a chance to see the UDL and higher education link that was included in the resources, if you're looking to go back to something, that was a really powerful link in my mind and had a lot of digging into not only what is it and why, but how do I implement it, some of the step-by-step kinds of things. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing. Take small steps, improve one piece, and you're going to be surprised at the impact that has for a lot of your students.
That website also had a good place to start with doing just things differently. And it's not necessarily that you're doing them bad, but doing them differently in a different way is also helpful in many instances. So it's if you don't know where to start or you don't even know what to think about that, UDL and higher ed had a good place of where do I start and what are some of the things that I can do right now that will change for many people and change learning for many people. And I guess just to hit on that again, one place that it says in that UDL and higher ed is ask your students, ask what they think needs more clarification. And this is something that is universally for people, whether they have a disability or not. Ask your students what they don't like about your Brightspace course or how you're teaching, and they'll have all sorts of examples of things they don't like, and how they think you could do better. So it's really, if you're looking for a place to start, that's maybe just ask your students and see what where they are most confused, or what is their muddiest point in terms of how you are expecting them to go through the Brightspace course, how you are expecting them to achieve their workflow. And that's a good place to start.
I want to go back to a comment that Lisa made about the accommodations and the text-based and more descriptive. A lot of people maybe miss what's being asked, but you might see a line in Brightspace or other software that says alternative text or alternate text. Make sure you're using that, because what that really is a description of the image that you're looking at. So many times you'll see it in Brightspace or other apps that say alternative text. And the idea is that it's an area that visual challenges can be overcome by using those and actually reading or hearing the description of the item that's in the image. So don't just breeze by that and say, I don't understand what they're looking for. That's really what that's for, is to give people a deeper description of the image that you see on the screen.
And I'm sorry, Mark, where is that located?
You're going to see it in a lot of different places as you put text, or excuse me, as you put graphics into different applications. Brightspace is there, and I can certainly dig that up, and I'll drop that into the comments here when I find it. But anytime you drop a piece of text, or excuse me, drop a graphic into different applications, you may see an alternate or alternative text pop up.
Oh.
And that's what it's asking for, is to go ahead and put that text in there so people can understand and get a deeper description of what that image is.
That's really neat.
I'll go dig that up and drop that in the comments.
How do you think this relates to exams in which we have diagrams and pictures as part of a test question? I'd never even thought about that until you just started talking about this alternate text.
It's huge. If you can't see the diagram, it's really tough to answer the question. And you might have all the knowledge in the world about that particular topic, but if you can't see it, you're probably not going to get that answered properly.
So would the only options be to not use a diagram or to use the alternate text? Or how should, because I know a lot of times in nursing and probably in some of the sciences as well, there'll be pictures of structures that you have to answer a question about. What would be the best way to approach that then?
I think that's a great question.
So I can't speak for all, all people who have challenges with vision. But I will say from my perspective, when I was going through college and even in elementary school, all the way through my education, when it came to diagrams and learning like structural things, like cellular makeup and whatnot, I had to learn the concepts of those, and then be able to explain that to whoever was proctoring my exam, or they would have to try to explain to me what diagram was presenting itself on the exam, and I'd have to try to explain in words what I wanted them to describe to me. So it was like reverse questioning, like, and so like it's not easy. Uh, a lot of times I would do would do my description in writing instead of like labeling a structure or something that isn't, like, that's why I can't be a nurse, right? Like there are certain things that are just very difficult to overcome, and diagrams and being able to interpret a lot of structural things is very challenging. But offering a paragraph, maybe like on this label, here's what it presents itself as, or giving the opportunity for a student to describe it in words, if that works, can be an option, but it isn't like without fault. It, you know, I wish I had an easy answer for that.
So I found with I do some testing in Brightspace of structures or bones, markings on bones, different things like that. And the best way I found to replace those is to also give a description of what they do. Cellular function, it's really easy to say, name this organelle that does this function. Name this organelle that has this. That way, because especially for cellular structures, they're never going to see it. For nursing and respiratory therapy and sonography, you need to know a bunch of these surface anatomy pieces, but you also can say, where is the structure? Is it medial to the spine, lateral to the spine, superior, inferior? And you can give a lot of descriptions that way in order to give it. And it gets to be really wordy. So really, it's catering to what you need for that situation. And a lot of situations, they need some of those wordy descriptions, while a lot of other people don't. And I just separate those parts out. I put name structure B, and then I have a space, and I say structure B does, and I go on and do a bigger description or definition. So I guess the other example I have of that is when I was teaching in the anatomy lab for PT students at Creighton, we had someone that was legally blind, and we had to go in for her lab practical and show her each of the muscles, hand it to her, let her feel it. She could get the structure, what it looked like. She could feel where it went, where it started, and all of those different things. And we would talk through what we could see and what she was feeling. And it really just takes a lot of writing and a lot of words in order to do that.
I want to jump out real quick and share my screen, and I'll just walk through the alternative text and how it works in Brightspace. We'll just share this real quick. Okay, can everybody see my screen? And a verbal yes would be great.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right,
Yes.
cool. So here we are in Brightspace, and I'm just adding in a new file. But anywhere you add a picture, we're just going to add this picture in. I'll go out to my computer and upload a file. When I choose use, and I go to add that picture, and a lot of people just skip on past this, but when I hit add, it comes up and asks for alternative text. So this is that spot where you put in either this image is decorative, they can ignore it, it provides no value, so move on, or I can go ahead and add my text in. And now that's going to be added to that. So when a visually challenged person clicks on that image, they're actually going to see or hear the description of what that item is that they're not able to see. So using that alternative text when you add images in is certainly a way to help with that testing environment that you talked about, Meg. Doesn't
Wow.
completely overcome it, but it certainly helps.
I must admit, I have never noticed that feature before.
Yeah, and a lot of people just skip on by it. I don't know what it is, so I'm going to skip it, and that's what that's for.
Joy put a question in the chat. I'm going to read it for her so we can discuss it. She said, how would you put a scale on a test for the students to evaluate? For example, I had the APGAR scale on my last test where I gave a scenario and then they had to use the scale to give the infant a score. How do you suggest working with that? Would the alternate text be the solution?
So Joy, for those of us that don't understand the APGAR scale, can you give us just a quick description of what that looks like or how that appears? You might be on mute, Joy.
I wonder if she's in a place that she can listen but
Yeah.
can't talk.
Yeah.
So I can give a brief description, and maybe I'm going to be wrong about that, but the APGAR scale is essentially what you score a newborn baby on things like there's color appearance, respirations, muscle tone, some other reflexes. And I don't know if it's like 1 to 5 or what the numbers are, but it's something like that. And so you could, I guess I'm 0 to 10. Okay. So my question for this is what is the picture you are trying to show? Are you showing the APGAR scale and then asking them to apply that to the scenario you're giving them? Because if so, oh, she should put a picture. Yeah, you could just put that in with text. You could put that in with text. It would be very laborious and not fun to write out, but you could do that. That could be done with text.
Something else that would be interesting to do with that, and I'm not sure how I would integrate that into a test necessarily, but that would be an interactive chart that we could certainly build that had a voice piece to it, to where when you clicked on each of the categories, it would read what that category said. That would be a pretty easy thing to build in something like a Keynote or a PowerPoint.
Although if it's during a test, you may not want it like speaking out at different times. So I think Lisa Johnson said you can use a table as alternate text. So Lisa, can you talk about that?
Well, I mean, there's sometimes depending on the software, the accessibility component that one is using, it can read across columns like a text reader. Like I use VoiceOver a good amount of the time, and it can read tables depending on how they're formatted. But also, like the APGAR scale could easily be converted just into text in a probably a pretty easy way. So it's just a matter of like sometimes we're used to it being presented in a certain way, and and that kind of makes us think, oh, this is the only way we can present it, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that way, if that makes sense.
And to kind of follow on to that, we certainly need to be more cognizant of users using headphones during testing so that they can listen to that. If we
Right.
know
I
that's
was
challenge for them.
actually thinking that, like, probably somebody who is, like maybe we don't like NMC, right? We don't encounter many students, if any, with visual impairments because it's challenging in terms of our admission requirements, what one needs to do to have, like there's maybe one visually impaired individual here on campus currently besides me. And And so that individual, those individuals may be in the testing center anyway, using headphones or having a live reader who's helping with those things and who can facilitate that. But headphones during an exam with audible speech going through those headphones is always an option as well.
Beyond visual, are there auditory issues that people have? I know that's a challenge for me, as I don't hear as well as I probably should. And are there tools that people are using to help with that?
My only experience with people with hearing impairments there are the occasional student who needs an amplifier on their stethoscope, but I have not actually dealt with anybody who needed extra assistance in class for hearing.
And I think you would be surprised how many do. Those of us that have challenges hearing typically tend to sit, and we know we need to sit closer to the front, and we find different ways to navigate around that. But at the same time, there are lots of other tools. So one that I use now is I can actually put my phone in essentially hearing aid mode and set it at the front of the class and use a headphone to listen to what's going on. So I use that in classes where I'm sitting, but I also use it in meetings, and I did it a lot with Apple in business meetings where you're sitting at a large table with a lot of people in a loud kind of congested area like a restaurant. And I would just set my phone down at the other end and put a hearing or the earbud in on the other end, and I could hear what was going on at the other end of the table. So lots of ways to think about how to make your class adaptable that way and at least acceptable. So if you see students with that headphone in, it could be that they're using it just to hear a little better.
Hey, Mark, is that available on their iPad?
I'd have to take a look. I would believe it would be.
Okay, just so if we do come across somebody that does struggle to hear like lectures and things like that, something we can offer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sometimes
But
it can be really helpful to have captioning on if it's available, like in Zoom. Sometimes you can have captioning turned on, or if there's captioning available in a video with videos that you're showing in classes, that can be helpful. Also thinking at just about like when we're talking to students or giving a lecture or whatever, making sure that now that we're not wearing masks, because masks are really challenging and for not just for hearing and like individuals with hearing impairments, but just in general, being able for people to see your mouth moving can be really helpful. Sometimes we're talking, we may have our hand in front of our mouth, or we're not looking at the people we're talking to. Being cognizant of looking where you're talking can be helpful to people who need to see that facial expression or your lips moving to complement what they're hearing.
I get into trouble when I face the whiteboard and I'm speaking.
This could also play a little bit into classroom management because, especially in these bigger classes, you always have people who are having their side conversations. And it seems like you can tell them to hush multiple times and they may not, but it may be worth saying, there may be people who have trouble hearing with a lot of background noise. So be even kinder to your classmates and stop the side conversations.
Absolutely. So that feature of hearing is actually on your iPad as well, or on the students' iPads as well. So the way that you get to that, I'm just going to share my screen again here real quick. Hate to be,
Thank you, Mark.
yeah. But the way that you access that is by going out to the top corner, and you'll see the ear down here, and you can just click on that. And then it says to connect a compatible audio device to live listen. And that can then connect to your phone or to your, I shouldn't say phone, connect to the earbuds. And you can turn on all kinds of filters. You can put different background sounds in and take them out. You can amplify. There's all kinds of different things. You may or may not see that in the iPad right off the bat. So what you need to do is go out to settings and control center. And you'll find that two things that are really handy: the hearing, turning that on, and also the magnifier. You can turn that on, and that will actually use your camera as a magnifier. So the visually impaired folks, I use this in the I'm getting old, so I have all the problems. Welcome to the golden years, as my dad said. I'm not quite sure why we call them golden years, but anyway, you can turn on the magnifier, and you can actually turn on the camera light. So I go to a restaurant, and the menu's in a little tiny italic type that I can't read. I can point my camera right at the menu and turn on the light and zoom in to see the text on that menu. And I'm not carrying around a big lighted magnifying glass that I remember my mother-in-law using for years. That she pull out of her purse and, okay, here's this big magnifier that pulls attention. I look like everybody else because I just pulled out my phone and I'm sitting at the table with all my friends looking at my phone while what I'm really doing is reading the menu. So some really handy ways. Oh, go ahead.
That screenshotting ability on a phone is really helpful, not just for so I do the same thing. I take a picture if a menu, and then I can zoom in as needed. But also like in a room, like when you're trying to see the PowerPoint and you may be too far away to see what's on the screen, taking a picture of that PowerPoint and then being able to zoom in to get a closer look at it when you may be too far away. Like iPhones really have really helped level the playing field in a lot of ways, because they're just some like Apple, I think, does a great job in terms of building in things that are just like, they make it easier for everyone. Even Siri, right? Think about it, like if you're a Siri user, your phone can work for you in an accessible way. Like it's a UDL kind of thing. Being able to make your phone do what you want it to do without having to stop and do it. Like we think about it as a convenience, right? But it's also an accessibility feature. And so Apple just does a great job with that, because the features are kind of built in and not added onto, which is really the premise of UDL.
All right, we're getting down to the last 5 minutes. Is there anything else or questions, concerns that didn't come out during our session? All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and drop in the link to the survey. And remember that you're now tracking all of your participation points and hours in the Dove tracking piece through Qualtrics. So go on out to the survey, quick answer a few questions, give us some feedback on how helpful or not helpful this was, all that good stuff. And then you'll automatically be tracked in all of your development points. Other than that, thanks a ton for a great session. I love the conversation. Keep up the great work, and we'll talk to you next time. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.